I'm now going to be showing you how to set up the camera projection texture map node in case you're unaware of how to do that. I'm just going to add just a standard terrain to the scene, and we're going to edit the material, and we can go to a map picture to start with if you want to load it in and then modify it. For now, I'm going to set it to the procedural colors and set it up manually, because we're going to have to set it up manually anyway. So what we're going to do is add in a texture map node, and change it over to texture map, and we can select the UV coordinates and change that over to the camera projection node. We can then select which camera we'd like to use. We can use the main camera, and then load in a texture. And I'm just going to grab a rock texture, and then we can connect that to our color output. Set up whether or not we want interpolation on. Better for low-res images. Now, if you're planning on creating a custom texture map for a terrain and painting on it, or rendering, say rendering this out, going into Photoshop or similar program and painting in a new texture and projecting it, and you wouldn't want the camera to move, a good thing to do once you have a projection like that is just add a keyframe. And we're just going to add it to all properties, and that way, making sure that auto keyframing is turned off, the camera will stay where it's at, not move around. You don't have to worry about losing any information that way. Another good thing you can do is create a copy of the camera and work in a different camera, render in a different camera, and that way you prevent from moving the other one. That's also helpful when we go into the terrain editor and view the material. We'll be able to see the OpenGL for that projected texture. And if you start adding new layers, there's a possibility of losing the OpenGL texture. So if we were to say mix this, in this case I'm just going to mix it directly with another color. In this case it's just mixing it with black. But if I wanted to add, let's say, color variation, let's desaturate it, lighten it up. Just kind of mix that together a little to add some variation to the texture map, but we can't see it in the OpenGL anymore. So there's a little trick I like to use to force the OpenGL, and that is to add in a color node, color correction, and set it to color blending, and connect the blending color on top, or the main color on top, with the texture map you want displayed in the OpenGL. We're going to set it to color mask, blending ratio to 1, and then you set the blending color to the actual color output that's going to render. And then what we can do is just connect to that color blending, and that's an option that's kind of built in to the advanced material editor, where you can adjust color blending and still see the texture, and that was under the map picture mode, but it basically allows you to force the OpenGL to the texture map. So we could add additional layers or do whatever, and we should be able to preserve the OpenGL if you're using it as a reference. And one thing I didn't do is set the aspect ratio. So if you need to adjust this to fit the aspect of the camera and the render output, take a look at your render options And in order to get the aspect ratio, you just divide the width by the height. So then we can go into the texture map, go to that camera function, and then we have the aspect ratio. So we can type in 1.777, and then fit the aspect of the texture map, the image, to the camera width. So it stretched it out in this case.